One, two, three, four.
Little Shop of Horrors is one of my favorite movie musicals. I quickly fell in love with it the first time I saw it at the age of 15. Every time I saw a reference to it in media, I got a little excited at the thought of other people appreciating it the way I did. The music is phenomenal, campy and fun. The actors are all perfect, the sets are great, the puppet is beautiful, and the comedy? Absolute gold. While in college, I did a research paper on the history of Little Shop. I thought I would expand on it in this video because it's pretty interesting. Some of you may be aware that Little Shop of Horrors is a musical satire of a 1960s horror film of the same name. It's not the same name, really. But the history of the movie actually goes back way further. The very first iteration of this story dates back to 1894, with The Flowering of the Strange Orchid, written by science fiction writer H.G. Wells. The story describes an orchid collector, Winter Wedderburn, who is killed by a mysterious blood-sucking orchid that he had recently obtained from the vaguely titled Atamans and Indies. Wells' inspiration for the story was the Victorian-era craze of collecting orchids for their rarity and exotic nature. In comparison to the environment of England, the fad was known as orchid delirium, and it was mainly exhibited by the wealthy members of English society. Winter names the plant John Smithia. It feels referential to the colonial mindset of renaming colonized lands. Winter is an orchid collector who took up the hobby because he has nothing going on in his life. He expresses how uneventful his life is, and even seems jealous that his friend broke an ankle because it's exciting. Seymour Krelborn from Little Shop is similar in that he wants more out of life, not necessarily because he's bored, but because he's poor and mistreated at work. The titular Strange Orchid is not an alien. H.G. Wells saves the invasion plot for War of the Worlds. Rather, the orchid is the last specimen that the explorer, named Batten, ever found before being consumed, supposedly, by jungle leeches. Similar to the baby Audrey II, the orchid is shriveled upon arrival. There's definitely a lot of 19th century "natives are savages" going on in this story. I'm not surprised, but it's worth addressing. It really shows the mindset of the time when the piece was written. Little Shop doesn't exactly shy away from using people of color as a source of mystery and exotic wonder either. The story continues as his other orchids die, but the strange orchid thrives. His housekeeper, who's also his cousin, does not like the plant at all. The orchid starts blooming flowers which emit a euphoric gas. Winter enters the greenhouse, starts tripping, and passes out. His cousin finds him with the tentacle roots of the plant draining his blood. She frantically tells an odd job man to get water and a doctor. She breaks the greenhouse windows, letting fresh air in. Winter is saved from the greenhouse and given a medicine of brandy and pink meat extract. God, I love old medicine. The cold London air kills the orchid. In the end, Winter is happy because something interesting happened in his life. I assume the main character being named Winter is an allegory of how he is incompatible with tropical plants, especially given his cold English home and his urban lifestyle. The moral of the text is that nature may be beautiful, but it is also deadly, and humanity will not be able to control it. Side note, while researching this, I realized that the story has a rating of 3.4 out of 5 by Goodreads. Does anyone else find it annoying that we have to assign an arbitrary number rating to everything? Especially century-old short stories? Like, by what standards are you rating this? I'm really going to read this and be like, yeah, I'm only feeling 68% satisfied. It's obnoxious. Someone says there's not much here, just read the synopsis and get the full thing. Because it was written at a time when everyone was dying of tuberculosis. You've got no time to read. It's unclear if Strange Orchid influenced this next story, but it's very possible. John Collier was a British fiction writer and screenwriter. He wrote many short stories which appeared in The New Yorker. One of these stories was Green Thoughts, written in 1930. During my research, I was unable to find a lot of historical information on Green Thoughts, aside from the fact that it may have inspired Little Shop. Physical copies of a book containing this and other short stories are sold online for high prices, and it's no longer in print. I was able to find the story on Apple Books as part of a collection called Fancies and Goodnight. Night, Volume 1, which contains other short stories by Collier. The story follows Mr. Mannering and his cousin Jenny. He recently purchased a strange plant. The plant was found from some vague expedition. The plant produces flowers that look strangely like a fly's head. Soon enough, the plant eats his cat, his cousin, and then himself. He goes through a transformation and wakes up as a flower on the plant. He sees his cat and his cousin's faces growing similarly out of the plant as flowers. He ponders his situation, unable to speak. Before long, his lawyer and his terrible nephew come looking for him. The nephew is named as the heir to his fortune. The nephew drinks Mannering's liquor, smokes his cigars, and makes himself comfortable in his home. The nephew soon discovers the faces on the plants. He laughs at his troubled relatives and plans on torturing them for being so judgmental of his horrible behavior. The nephew pulls on the tendrils and proves that Mannering can feel pain. The nephew eventually discovers that Mannering was going to cut him out of the inheritance. The nephew does some cutting of his own and cuts Mannering's flower off the vine. This story is interesting because the plant isn't entirely the focus. It's more of a tool that puts the main character in a position of victimhood to his evil nephew. H.G. Wells' The Blooming of a Strange Orchid directly inspired another piece of literature, Arthur C. Clarke's 1956 The Reluctant Orchid. The story follows a short, scrawny clerk ironically named Hercules Keating. This description just screams Seymour Krelborn. Hercules is a friendless botanist with an impressive collection of cacti and orchids. He has one relative who, frankly, sounds cool as hell. Aunt Henrietta is 6 foot, drives a Jaguar, smokes cigars, and breeds tough dogs. Henrietta views men as the weaker sex. If you're a 6-foot woman and have a bone-crushing handshake, I can't even blame you. She's fond of her nephew and likes to visit him. She patronizes him, which instills feelings of resentment within him. Hercules buys an orchid that originates vaguely from the Amazon. We're still not up to outer space yet. He's unhappy with the purchase, given that the plant looks like it's about to die and it smells rotten. The plant starts to grow and bloom. It develops long, vibrating tendrils as thick as an arm and long enough to hit the floor. Hercules goes to a library to study. Weirdly enough, he picks up H.G. Wells' Flowering of a Strange Orchid, which is really weird, right? Imagine if in the 1986 movie, like halfway through the plot, they went to the cinema and watched the 1960s movie and were like, oh boy, I hope that doesn't happen with our plant, we better be careful. Isn't that kinda like cheating? Hercules waves a piece of raw meat in front of his plant. The tendrils reach out and snag it. "Jumpin' Jehoshaphat," he says. Yeah, if I saw a plant grab a slab of beef, I'd probably say, oh shit, but same energy, I guess. The plant doesn't eat with a mouth. Rather, the tendrils wrap around the meat and digest it until it's gone. It's like a mix of Audrey 2 and the blood-sucking orchid. I'd call it a carnivorous cocoon. Although he is frightened by the plant, Hercules considers showing it around and becoming famous. The plant starts developing a nervous system and a form of intelligence. It makes a whistling noise, which is thought to lure in prey. Also, I love this description calling the plant a vegetable octopus. It sounds adorable. Now imagine a version of Little Shop that's still a musical, but the music always centers around the plant singing. Imagine the plant has a beautiful siren song that lures people and animals towards it. The song could even be paired with the euphoric gas that it emits. The presentation of it could be so eerily beautiful. I think it'd be a great film. Hercules invites his aunt over with the intention of feeding her to the plant. When she approaches it, it cowers in fear from her. Aunt Henrietta starts petting the plant and it warms up to her, which is so goddamn cute. The two of them become friends, and Henrietta calls Hercules even more often to make sure he's treating the plant well. The orchid is said to even be afraid of mice, until Henrietta relaxes it. Hercules becomes a shell of a man, and, like, good. He's kind of a jerk. Although Aunt Henrietta is overbearing and judgmental, she genuinely loves her nephew. It's made clear that the two of them only have each other as family, which makes it more heartbreaking that Hercules wants to get rid of her. While it's satisfying to see him fail, it's very distressing to know that she will go through her years not realizing that her nephew deeply despises her. A more painful version of this story is one where Hercules succeeds and slowly realizes how cruel and lonely he truly is. Finally, we reach the cinema. The Little Shop of Horrors is a dark comedy film from 1960 directed by Roger Corman.
I was having lunch with the studio manager of a small rental studio at which I had space in Hollywood, and he mentioned that they were finishing shooting on a film and had nothing coming in. And I said, look, leave the sets up and I'll see if I can't make something very inexpensively, and I will tailor something to the existing sets. And he said, fine, how long do you want them? I said 2 days. And then I met with Chuck Griffith, who was a writer I had worked with successfully several times before, particularly on a comedy horror film called Bucket of Blood. And Chuck and I brainstormed for about 1 day and eventually came up with the idea of the man-eating plant. And Chuck wrote the script, I think, in something like 2 weeks. I made a deal with the actors for a 1-week salary.
Growing up, I had a copy of the movie on VHS, but I never actually watched it. I always remembered being creeped out by the cover. I watched the movie for the first time in order to create this video, and I have to say, I really like it. Going into it, I expected it to be creepy with a little bit of that 1960s campiness. I expected heavy Twilight Zone energy. There's definitely some creepy moments, but overall the film is just kind of goofy. I was a little disappointed that it wasn't scarier, but for what I got, I enjoyed it. In some places, it's even goofier than the 1986 musical. The film starts with the same set of characters: Seymour Krelborn, Audrey, Mr. Mushnick, Orin Scrivello, DDS, and the plant. The dynamics are similar with a few exceptions. Seymour is not an orphan. He actually lives with his mother. She suffers from either Munchausen syndrome or just wants attention. She includes medicine like cough syrup and cod liver oil into all the food that they make. Audrey is not in an abusive relationship with the dentist here. I was surprised to see that the dentist was even a part of this film since he's so wacky in concept. Another difference is that the film takes place in Los Angeles, where the musical takes place in New York City. The film starts with a framing device of a detective on Skid Row.
The most terrifying period in the history of my beat began in a little rundown floor shop called Mushnick's.
We transition to Mr. Mushnick threatening to fire Seymour for all of his bad decisions and screw-ups.
Look on him, everybody. Look at the quality of his work. I ask you, when I fired him, where is he going to get such another good job?
Seymour's response is always,
I didn't mean it. You didn't mean it. You never mean it. You didn't mean it the time you put up the bouquet with the get well card in the funeral parlor.
Seymour asks to keep his job if he can show off a new amazing plant that will drive up business. There's also this wonderful character who's just a customer at the flower shop that likes to eat flowers. Like, he keeps showing up all throughout the movie, and every time you see him, he's dumping buttloads of salt onto a flower and eating it.
Well, I've had better.
Well, this is a small shop.
Oh, that's okay. You know, those big places, they're full of pretty flowers, expensive flowers. When you raise them for looks and smell, you're bound to lose some food value. I like to eat these little out-of-the-way places.
God, I love him. I have no idea why he wasn't in the musical. This guy could have served that purpose. He's already a weirdo.
Where did you get it?
Just have him eat the flowers at the end of his scene. Seymour bought the seeds of the new plant from a Japanese man who found them somewhere. It's implied in this movie that the plant is a hybrid of other species. Seymour's plant, named Audrey Jr., gets the shop some attention, but he soon realizes that it feeds on blood.
Blood? You like blood? Oh, you must be kidding.
Seymour becomes anemic and desperate to feed it in order to keep his job and his newfound popularity in the eyes of his companions and the public. All throughout the film, Seymour and Audrey have a budding romance. Seymour goes for a walk by the railroads. He carelessly tosses a rock and it accidentally kills a guy. He drags the sack of flesh around town looking for some place to dump it, until he ends up back at the shop.
Eat me. Eat me. Look, Chowhound, don't bother me. I got problems of my own. I'm hungry. I don't care what you are. Can't you see I'm knocked out? I just killed a man. I'm a murderer. You think it's fun to be a murderer? You think it's fun to haul around a sack full of food?
He decides to feed it to the plant. Mushnick is at a restaurant celebrating the shop's success with Audrey, but he forgets his cash. He goes back to the shop to get some from the register and sees Seymour feeding the plant. There's a funny scene where Mr. Mushnick enters the busy shop the next day.
What did I tell you? You wouldn't be interested in selling a half interest in this place, huh?
Mr. Mushnick, we talked to the committee, and they said we could use your flower on the float. Hey, guess what? We're going to feature Audrey Jr. Right on top.
Boy.
Can't you just picture it?
I can picture
Oh, won't the people just eat it up?
Eat up the people.
And we're going to have the big part of it open, so she can sit in it.
Who?
The Queen, with her crown and scepter. She'll be so cute. Oh, you could just eat her up.
Eat up the girl.
Seymour is interrogated by Mr. Mushnick and reveals that he has a toothache. Seymour visits the sadistic dentist. Seymour engages in a sword fight with him to avoid unnecessary oral surgery. This is goofier than the musical where Seymour just planned to shoot him. Then friggin' Jack Nicholson shows up assuming that Seymour is the dentist.
My patient just left. You could come in now.
Oh, goody. I didn't see the other man leave.
Well, he went out the back door.
Jack is a masochist and wants Seymour to treat him, similar to Bill Murray from the musical.
It's been quite an afternoon. I can truly say I've never enjoyed myself so much. I'll recommend you to all my friends.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.
Seymour feeds the murdered dentist to the plant. There's a scene where the shop is robbed. Mushnick tells the burglar that the money is inside of the plant. The plant then eats the burglar. I think this decision is interesting. Mushnick is now more directly complicit in the murderous methods of feeding the plant. Granted, he was acting in self-defense here, but given that he has always been wary of the plant, it's a very unsettling step for his character. Seymour and Audrey fall in love, but it falls apart when she assumes that Seymour is being rude to her. In reality, it's just the plant.
Because I'm in love with you, Audrey.
Oh, I'm in love with you too, Seymour.
Feed me.
What'd you say?
I was just kidding.
I'm dying from hunger.
All right, if you're so hungry, eat something, but forget about me.
Gee, I'm sorry, Audrey.
Give me to eat.
If you can't control yourself, I'm going home.
I need some chow.
Oh,
Seymour gets hypnotized by the plant, which we didn't know it could do until now.
Now you will do as I say. Do you follow me?
Yes, master.
Seymour gets hit on by a woman who he then tries to feed to the plant. The faces of the victims appear as flowers on the plant. Mr. Mushnick throws Seymour under the bus even though he killed the burglar.
Mr. Crawboy, how do you explain this?
I didn't mean it! That's right, officer. He didn't mean to kill them.
The detective from the beginning of the movie hunts Seymour down. After a chase scene, they lose track of Seymour. Seymour goes back to the shop and tries to kill the plant, but he is soon eaten by it.
he was such a good boy. Seymour!
I didn't mean it.
Overall, I really like this movie. There's plenty of dry humor, but a little bit of slapstick too. I feel like Mr. Mushnick is a bit more prevalent in this film compared to the 1986 one, while Seymour is simultaneously given less agency. Seymour is more so influenced by his mother and Mr. Mushnick than by his own desires. His main goal isn't really to become famous, but to survive Skid Row and to keep his job. Seymour seems to be a product of an overbearing society. His mother overwhelms him with her exaggerated health concerns. His boss constantly threatens to fire him, and Seymour is constantly afraid of messing up. He even fumbles Audrey. He definitely appears anxious and has a guilty conscience, which is made clear by the fact that he always says,
I didn't mean it.
You didn't mean it.
his intentions are always genuine, even though his results may be lackluster. After the feeding, he views it as a good thing because he's bringing wealth to his struggling workplace. He only murders people and feeds the plant either through accidental causes or through hypnosis. The most questionable murder that he commits is the dentist, who you could argue he kills out of self-defense, and then he just made use of the situation. It's ironic because in the 1986 movie, killing the dentist is the most justified action there is. I think it borrows equally from Green Touch, The Reluctant Orchid, and The Flowering of a Strange Orchid. You have the blood-sucking plant from Strange Orchid that inspired every other story. The scrawny botanist tries to feed his enemies to the plant element of Reluctant Orchid, and the face growing out of the flowers element from Green Touch. In 1995, a comic adaptation of the 1960s movie was created. I won't cover it too heavily, since it's pretty much a verbatim interpretation of the movie. I will say that the art style makes the characters look very strange. Following the 1960 film, we have the 1982 off-Broadway musical adaptation.
Don't meet nice boys when you live on Skid Row, Mr. Bushnick.
Suspense.
Little red dots all over the floor.
And romance.
Let me see more.
It's bone-chilling. It's spine-tingling. It's a musical. It's a nifty laugh riot, entertaining as it is exotic. Little Shop of Horrors. Don't shop around. Go see it at the Westwood Playhouse.
The musical was directed by Howard Ashman and featured music by Alan Menken. From what I can tell, the 1982 musical was the first of its kind in a long string of musical stage plays adapted from movies, with musicals such as Heathers, Beetlejuice, SpongeBob, Lion King, and even the off-Broadway production of Saw the Musical, which was written by my friend Zoe Jordan. I'm basing my analysis of the 1982 musical on a recording of a production from 1984 at the Orpheum Theatre. I will also reference a particularly well-done modern musical production of the play. The original production ran for 5 years. When it closed on November 1st, 1987, after 2,209 performances, it was the third longest running musical and the highest grossing production in off-Broadway history. The musical is very similar to the '86 movie in terms of the script. The two mainly diverge in terms of the music featured and the ending. The musical includes the songs You Never Know, Closed for Renovation, Mushnick and Son, Just the Gas, Call Back in the Morning, and a finale song called Don't Feed the Plant. The song Don't Feed the Plant is in the alternate ending of the '86 movie, but not in the theatrical release. The '86 film has the song Mean Green Mother from Outer Space, which doesn't appear in the musical. My favorite modern production of the stage musical is the American Musical Theater of San Jose's production from 2008. The two songs that stick out to me in this are Somewhere That's Green and Mushnick and Son. Mushnick and Son is a goddamn bop. Mushnick pulls out a clarinet and has a whole solo. It's incredible. You have to watch it. Somewhere That's Green is done beautifully. In the '86 movie, and even somewhat in the '84 production, the song is played for laughs. I remember always being disinterested in this song when watching the movie when I was younger. I felt like it was kind of slow and sappy, and of course there are some funny bits to the song, like the line about the giant TV screen being small because technology, but it always felt like the slowest part of the '86 movie. But when I saw the way that San Jose handled the song, it hit me like a truck. This isn't some goofy shit, this is an abused woman who wants a safe, simple, and loving home. The backdrop is all black, it's just Audrey and the chorus. Audrey sings with this passion that just grips you.
Our kids watch Howdy Doody as the sun sets in the west. A picture out of Better Homes and Gardens magazine. From Skid Row, I dream we'll go somewhere that's green.
It's not played as being goofy because she wants the simple things. It's played as tragic because all she wants are these simple things. This is how you present the emotional core of your character. The ending of the play shows Audrey being fatally injured by the plant. In a heartbreaking scene, she sacrifices herself and her dreams of a happy life in order to give Seymour his initial dream of wealth and fame. She asks to be fed to the plant so it can grow and make Seymour wealthy. It's a killer moment because at this point, Seymour realizes that all he needs in life is Audrey's love, and that the plant is killing him from within. Seymour snaps and tries to kill the plant, but he gets eaten in the process. Don't Feed the Plant plays as an investor begins harvesting leaf samples to sell the plant across the country and encourage the invasive species to eat everyone. The song Don't Feed the Plant summarizes the anti-capitalist message of the musical. Wealth is obtained at the cost of unethical consumption, and greed will ultimately lead to our demise. And finally, we've reached the 1986 film. The film features Rick Moranis, Ellen Greene, Steve Martin, Vincent Gardenia, Tisha Campbell, Michelle Weeks, Tashina Arnold, Jim Belushi, Bill Murray, John Candy, and the man himself, Levi Stubbs. Levi Stubbs was an American singer. He was a member of the group The Four Tops. His acting career is small but strong, having only performed as Audrey II and as Mother Brain in the cartoon Captain N the Game Master. The film was directed by Frank Oz. It was originally going to have Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese involved in it. The film was distributed by Warner Brothers. The film was also produced by the Geffen Company, named after its founder David Geffen. The company is known for also producing Risky Business, Beavis and Butthead Do America, Beetlejuice, the Beetlejuice cartoon, and Tales from the Crypt. Seymour Krelborn is a meek orphan who works at a flower shop on Skid Row. He takes verbal abuse from his boss, Mr. Mushnick, and has romantic feelings for his coworker, Audrey. Ellen Greene first played Audrey on Broadway, and then reprised her role later in the film. The shop is suffering financially, and Seymour has dreams of leaving Skid Row, so he puts a strange and interesting plant specimen on display in the shop to get attention. Business starts booming, but Seymour becomes anemic as he feeds the plant his blood. When the plant gets bigger, it starts demanding meat, in song form.
To create the plant in all its stages, including lip-synced vocalizing, was the technical challenge for animatronics wizard Lyle Conway.
Well, I'd worked with Frank before on Dark Crystal and Muppet Caper, and he called me to see how I felt about designing the plant. We got together. I'd seen the play a couple times in New York, and did some drawings and did some small sketches and maquettes, small sculpts of the plant. Well, there's 7 sizes of the plant. This is the smallest one here. And we sort of approached this one from the standpoint of a merchandising concept within the film.
Seymour grapples with the morals of killing and feeding people to the hungry plant, but he's persuaded to kill Audrey's abusive boyfriend, Dr. Orin Scrivello DDS. In this movie, the masochist patient comes before Seymour as opposed to after. Seymour tries to kill the dentist, but he overdoses on laughing gas before he can be shot.
Oh, your mouth's a mess, kid.
I had a lot of fun with Steve. Steve is sounds a little cliche, but he's really a professional. You know, he's like a great guy to work with because he's meticulous and he's disciplined, and yet he's tremendously funny. I mean, I'd met him before once, and I was always a huge fan of his, and I thought he was a really funny guy, but I didn't realize how funny he was in person. He really has a bizarre, unique sense of humor. The things that he comes up with just on the set, it's the line that everyone wishes they had come up with.
In the musical version, there's more of an arc with Mr. Mushnick where he wants to encourage Seymour to not outgrow him, and Mr. Mushnick offers to adopt him. Mr. Mushnick witnesses Seymour feeding Orin Scrivello to the plant. Seymour loses touch of his morals even further when the plant convinces him to kill Mr. Mushnick. This line is very haunting to me.
When he's gone, the world will be yours.
I had seen it mentioned somewhere, Audrey is actually looking in the mirror at himself, implying that he's singing about getting rid of Seymour and taking over the world. I think it's a great touch. These words ring true as Seymour becomes even more famous without Mr. Mushnick. While digging, I found an extended cut of the song The Meek Shall Inherit, and if I'm being honest, I can see why they cut it. It feels like a different energy compared to the rest of the movie. Seymour's lines are very on the nose compared to the more subtle conflict within him.
My future's starting, I've got to let it stick with that plant, and gee, my bank account will thrive.
It's good that he's clarifying his motivation, but I feel like it's presented well without this. Instead of him telling you what he's feeling, you just kind of witness his breakdown later, which I think works pretty well. The dream imagery ranges from kind of bad to sort of interesting. I do like this part where he climbs the stairs. Seymour plans to skip town and abandon the plant. The plant tries to eat Audrey in order to keep its grasp on Seymour. In this version, Seymour saves Audrey and kills the plant after the song Mean Green Mother from Outer Space. The two of them live happily ever after, somewhere that's green. In the alternate version, which I think is very fun, the plant kills both of them, starts getting sold in shops across the country, becomes giant, and takes over the planet. Look at these practical effects, it's gorgeous. The alternate ending, where Audrey 2 conquers the world, did not test well with audiences. It's disappointing because I love the way this looks, but still, I'm a sucker for a happy ending. My friend Winsome Jacobs made a very good point about the problem with the theatrical ending.
Okay, so here's my thing. I love a happy ending, and that's kind of the problem. Because you see, when they were making the movie, they realized that the audience preferred the happy ending as opposed to everybody dying and the world assumedly being destroyed. But the problem with that is by allowing Audrey and Seymour to live and getting their happily ever after, the story stops being a tragedy. Because that's what Little Shop is meant to be. It's meant to be a tragedy. And for a show about how greed and the evils of capitalism can and will destroy humanity, it's a little ironic that they chose to soften that blow for the movie in order to turn a profit. Personally, I think that's a pretty significant betrayal of the original story's intended message, but I mean, hey, what can you do? But yeah, that's why I do not enjoy the movie anywhere near as much as I enjoy the stage show.
A comic adaptation of the 1986 film was produced by DC Comics and released in 1987. The artists did not have footage from the film to work off of, meaning that the comic book characters don't entirely resemble their film counterparts. However, the comic follows the same plot as the movie. The comic even experienced the same trouble with the finale that the film did. The comic was originally going to feature the bad ending, and pages for it were even drawn, until it was decided that the happy ending would be produced. Personally, I like the art style of the comic. The movie went on to inspire different merchandise like t-shirts, bobbleheads, and even Topps trading cards. I actually own this Audrey 2 Funko Pop. It's one of the few Funko Pops that I own because most of them look like trash. I think this one is pretty cool though. There's all these other ones, but you don't have Mr. Mushnick. I also have these stickers made by Topps. I'm getting flashbacks to the Wazoo video. I really like the art on the cover. It says there's a stick of gum inside, so let's see how that is. Yep, that's 40-year-old bubblegum. I don't want to rip open the package, so I'm trying to be gentle with it. We have these stickers of the alternate ending. We have the confrontation of the Audreys here. This one's kind of cool, kind of fun. Audrey dreams of a wonderful life with Seymour, far from the doldrums of Skid Row. I didn't know doldrums was a word. This might be my favorite so far. I like this art style. There's a lot of art focusing on Audrey being eaten by Audrey. The Devil Dentist of Death. I've never heard him called that, but you know what, that's fun. Here we have a fourth of Rick Moranis. This looks like an alternate happy ending where the Audreys end up together. You have a portion of the skyline. I wonder if these make a poster. I guess the idea was that you buy more of these cards and then you have a picture at the end of it. A preview of the death scene of Mr. Mushnick. It's kind of specific. This is kind of a good one. A few months ago, I was on a business trip in Las Vegas. While I was staying in the Paris hotel, I came across this Little Shop of Horrors slot machine. I thought it was really cool. It shows scenes from the movie. It has somebody voice acting as Audrey too. And that's the 1986 Little Shop of Horrors movie. So, logically, you think we would be done now. We've covered the origins, dating back to 1896, up until the movie musical that was the basis for this entire project. However, we haven't talked about the cartoon. The cartoon Little Shop is one season with 13 episodes. It aired on Fox Kids. It aired between September 7th and November 30th, 1991. I kid you not that I dreaded this part of the review the most. Watching this cartoon was a chore. 13 episodes of 30-minute content that feels like vomit on your eyes. Well, it just ain't fun. The pacing is terrible, the writing is crap, the animation is creative, but still very choppy. The voice acting is kinda good, but the feeling it all leaves me with is abysmal. Some notable changes here. Seymour is not an orphan. His mom is very much alive. His mom is still obsessed with health like in the 1960s movie. The chorus of Crystal, Ronette, and Chiffon are not present here. Instead, we occasionally get a chorus of singing flowers, which begs the question, how did they become alive? And then what makes Audrey 2 so special? Orin Scrivello is replaced with Payne Driller, an obnoxious bully character. His voice is very annoying.
Hand it over, Quillborn.
And his braces have robotic tools built into them. Audrey is Mr. Mushnick's daughter, which makes this line more confusing.
Daddy left early, Mama was poor.
In the first episode, she wants to grow up and become a firefighter. Her main character trait in this series is that every couple of episodes, she'll have a new job that she wants to be in when she's older. Audrey 2 is called Audrey Jr. here, just like in the 1960 film. He's not an alien, rather he was grown from a prehistoric seed that survived millions of years. Also, he has eyeballs now. Just to confirm all the locations that the strange and interesting plant has come from in all of these stories, we have the Atamans and Indies, unknown, the Amazon, also unknown but possibly a hybrid, outer space, and prehistoric New York City. You'll notice that all of the main characters are children now. This was part of a 90s trend of turning characters into kids, like Baby Muppets and Baby Looney Tunes. In hindsight, this show is such a weird idea, because depending on which version you watch, all of these characters are dead. Episode 1 is called Bad Seed. The episode begins with some exposition about Seymour and his life.
You see, my problem is, I've got everything it takes to be a nerd. Ah! Except brains.
He has a prophetic dream about meeting Audrey 2, like some Joseph King of Dreams shit. In his dream sequence, he sees the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a neat reference considering that Arthur C. Clarke, writer of The Reluctant Orchid, also wrote 2001. He finds the Audrey Jr. seed and thinks it's prehistoric. The seed sprouts in his lunchbox, and I guess it sprouts a mini pot, too? There's a musical number that kinda keeps in the 60s doo-wop style. It's not good, but hey, they tried.
Business, what a joke.
The intro song and the back scores usually have that 90s feel, so it's kind of a weird contrast. I feel like they should have leaned one way or the other.
Go with the flow, Seymour. I can get home in no time on this thing. I just hope it knows the way.
Aren't you driving?
What's driving?
In some scenes, Audrey tries to hide himself from people. In other scenes, he's just out and about, making his sentience known to the public. Audrey Jr. has the power of persuasion, which I guess checks out based on the other iterations we've had. He calls this power vegetable magnetism. He hypnotizes people with his spit, but he can also manipulate plants and plant matter, such as cotton shirts or paper, which is a little cool. In episode 1, the plant's main goal doesn't seem to be murder. It eats meat pizzas and tries to eat people, but it doesn't pursue this very actively. The plant likes going out on the town and shaking the dust of this place off its roots. He doesn't like the smog of urban living and wants to live somewhere that's green. That's weird. Audrey Jr. goes back to the petrified forest park. Yeah, there it is. He survived extinction by being petrified as a seed, yet he somehow remembers having a family. He refers to his time period as the Vegozoic era. Audrey Jr. finds out that people eat vegetables and starts radicalizing the plants in Mushnik's shop. The revolution fails, but Mushnik is happy that his plants look better. At the end of each episode, you see that the show is produced by Marvel Productions Ltd., which is now known as New World Animation. The company was responsible for other cartoons like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Jem and the Holograms, My Little Pony, and even a cartoon adaptation of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Episode 2 is called Real Men Aren't Made of Quiche. This title card led me down a rabbit hole, in which I found out that there's this societal culture war over whether or not eating quiche makes a man more feminine. This is what happens when you don't have real problems. Seymour reads a paper to kids in his class. Hey, how come they look normal? Seymour's got this weird beak going on. The paper puts everyone to sleep, even the portrait of Abe Lincoln. It's kind of funny. Meanwhile, Audrey Jr. teaches the plants about being carnivorous.
B is for Brontosaurus. When they're ripe, you can't beat them. C is for commuter train. Many parts are edible.
Seymour tries to find out where his new home ec class is, and straight up gets called a weenie.
Oh yeah, the weenie who wants to take home ec.
He finds out Audrey is in the class too. She starts getting fascinated with a new model of refrigerator. Is this a reference to somewhere that's green? I don't know. There's a lot of sexist themes in this episode, relating to the idea of what makes a man a man. Payne Driller finds Seymour and makes fun of him. And now he has a posse. How come they look like that?
If you wanna be a man, just listen and you'll see. You gotta cause a lot of trouble. Are you following me? You need a name. As tough as pain. Not Tilly Seymour. You couldn't be more of a wimp.
This whole song is about how men are incompetent and illiterate.
But I'm a man.
Why does he walk like that? It looks like his spine is broken. Seymour turns into a hot dog.
I'm a hot dog!
So you can tell from this that the animation is very like trippy. And if it wasn't like seizure inducing and too fast to see, it could have been interesting. And the songs go on way too long. Not to mention, certain characters, like Payne Driller, cannot sing for shit.
You always lie, we're always mean. You gotta stay up late at night, ready for a fight if you take home ec.
so it just makes your ears bleed. Seymour tells Audrey Jr. he needs to cook something for tomorrow's class. They find Audrey working in the store. There's a moment that feels reminiscent of the 1960s film where Audrey thinks Seymour is speaking, but really it's Audrey Jr.
They sure don't have a very good meat department here. Seymour, that's very rude.
Audrey Jr. reveals that he isn't making a stew, he's making a vegetable Frankenstein man named Stu. They sing about finding a human brain to bring him to life.
A human brain.
Cat soup!
They settle on putting the robotic refrigerator computer brain in the vegetable man, and it just goes crazy immediately. It tries to freeze the whole room. They defeat the vegetable man, and they eat his corpse to celebrate. The next episode is called Back to the Fuchsia. Seymour rides on the Magic School Bus? He's going for a class trip to the Skid Row Museum of Uninteresting History. Go fuck yourself.
The Skid Row Museum of Uninteresting History.
I love how the background score sings the words biodegradable for emphasis.
In the future, all our trash cans will be biodegradable.
Hijinks happen and Seymour gets incarcerated, setting a lifelong trend of being pursued by law enforcement. Audrey Jr. decides he wants to go back in time to see his family and to eat some dinosaurs. They make a time machine out of a roller coaster and a Ferris wheel. He uses the power of vegetable magnetism to manipulate the wood and create his time machine. Audrey is conflicted about erasing Seymour from history, but decides to go through with the plan.
If I can get back and nip those dinosaurs in the bud, then us plants will rule the world forever. Of course, that means there won't ever be any people. And Seymour's history. It's no skin off your potato. You'll be back in the Mesozoic. You're right. Seymour will probably be a lot happier if he never exists.
He'll be happier if he never existed. That's such a thought-provoking line from such a stupid fucking show. As you could tell, the relationship between Seymour and Audrey Jr. in this show is a little complicated, but we'll get to that later. All throughout the show, there's so much physical violence and verbal abuse happening towards Seymour. It's not funny slapstick, it's just kind of numbing after a while. Seymour thinks that he's back in the Vegozoic era, but he's actually just in a botanical garden. Audrey doesn't get transported anywhere.
Poor dude must think he's in the Mesozoic age.
Hey, Marshall Brain, you're thinking like a piece of moss. What do you care what happens to Seymour?
You know why you care. Because Seymour is your good and true green friend.
The episode ends with him escaping and meeting up with Audrey and whatever. Episode 4 is called Unfair Science. Seymour watches a film in science class from a famous scientist named Dr. Appalling. Side note, his teacher looks terrifying. This is the first episode that Seymour acknowledges the chorus of living singing flowers.
These are the dim bulbs. I'm using them in my science project.
Seymour tests the effect of different music on plants. Now this is a real thing in actual real life. Here it just makes them dress up in different song-appropriate outfits. Why are his teeth so big here?
Let's see what effect jazz has on plants.
The main plot of this episode is that Seymour wants to become famous for something he invented. Audrey here builds a milk pasteurizer for the science fair because her new dream is to become a milkman. Audrey Jr. builds Seymour a machine that turns people into flowers, which is a little similar to the 1960 movie and to Green Touch. Maybe, not really. Seymour doesn't think the machine works and brings Audrey as his presentation instead. Which, like, yeah, you revived a prehistoric seed. Audrey has a musical sequence where he manipulates all the paper and plants in the room. Jack Nicholson is there too, I guess, which I'll count as a reference to the 60s movie. Audrey Jr. destroys everything in the room, and Seymour wins the science fair by default. The scientist turns out to be evil. He turns people into teeth. He has a musical number.
Unfair science. Power.
I love this line here.
Do you think the government will go through with my appalling plan when they find out what my floor data really does?
They might.
The scientist wants to claim Seymour's work is his own. Audrey saves Seymour and the episode ends. Episode 5 is called Stage Blight. It's all about the theater!
The script is the most important part of any play.
And the least important part of a Fox Kids cartoon adaptation. Audrey reveals that she wants her new career to be as a stagehand. Audrey Jr. talks with Seymour about plays.
What's this play about?
It's called Our Town. It's about how we don't appreciate how beautiful life is until it's too late.
Audrey rips off the play Our Town in order to write his own play, Flower Town. Our Town is a real play written by Thornton Wilder in 1938. It was originally performed on the Campbell Playhouse radio show on May 12, 1938, and starred Orson Welles. On October 30th, 1938, Orson Welles performed the War of the Worlds broadcast, which was based on H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. H.G. Wells also wrote The Flowering of the Strange Orchid, which 95 years later led to this cartoon.
Everybody got that?
Seymour meets this professional director character hired to run the school play. I knew jobs in the industry were hard to find, but this is ridiculous.
Let's see which one of you fortunate tragedians gets to be in a chinless production.
Audrey uses his spit to influence the director to make Seymour an actor. The director thinks Seymour wrote the play and wants to claim the play as his own. Isn't this just the science fair plot, but with a play?
Give up this charade. I know you're a writer. I've seen you act.
The director plans to straight up kill Seymour, who is a child, in order to steal the play. The plan fails. Yada, yada, yada. Episode 6 is called I Loathe the Parade. Audrey wants a gift from Mushnick and Seymour helps out.
I think she's finally starting to notice me.
A suspicious traveling salesman approaches Seymour in an alley like a goddamn drug dealer.
Wanna buy an exotic flowering plant? I'm having a special on Venus flytraps.
But I don't know if Mr. Mushnick will like it.
How about if I throw in some flies?
My briefcase full of bees ought to put a stop to that.
Seymour is told to deliver flowers to a parade, similar to the 1960 movie. Audrey Jr. falls in love with the Venus flytrap and fantasizes about their romance. Their date doesn't go well because she isn't a talking plant.
I know dinner was a flop, but for the love of Pete Moss, why don't you at least say something? Anything.
She's just a plant, Junior. She doesn't know how to talk.
Audrey Mushnick eventually sees the flytrap and thinks it's a gift from Seymour. She sings.
What have you got there behind your back? Is that a Venus flytrap?
To be fair, this song isn't even that bad. I kinda like it. Audrey Jr. tries to eat her. It's a reference. Audrey is sad about his girlfriend plant.
I wish Seymour was here. At least I'd have somebody to take my misery out on.
He turns on the TV and watches a parody of Orson Welles.
Orson Welles here. I have humbly consented to provide my insights and unique perspective in interpreting this annual tournament of hoses parade.
Audrey tries to end the parade because he thinks it's exploitation. Kinda. An interesting point of note is that at the end of each episode of this show, an ad for the Bill and Ted cartoon plays over the credits.
Resident art experts Bill and Ted believe that as great art goes, the Mona Lisa is the tops. But how did the Mona Lisa get that mysterious smile, that knowing gaze, and what's she doing at the San Dimas Mall? Join the totally tubular time-traveling twosome for far-out fun on Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, coming up next, right here on Fox.
And I wish I was watching that instead. Episode 7 is called Air Jr. Seymour joins a football team. Mr. Mushnick comments on Audrey's constant changing career dreams.
Last week you wanted to be, a refrigerator repairman. 2 weeks ago, a fireman. So why now, a shoe salesman?
The plot here just focuses on buying shoes. Seymour gets flying shoes.
Your vegetable magnetism only works on things made out of plants.
Don't be a sap. Haven't you ever heard of a rubber tree?
There's not a lot to talk about in this episode, except there's 2 voice actors who sound very familiar. I could be wrong, but this guy sounds like Jeff Bennett.
That's a really, really big air shoe.
And this guy sounds like D. Bradley Baker.
Can I get a lift?
No, then get off my lip.
Episode 8 is a Halloween episode, called Untitled Halloween Story. Fantastic. I love this Frankenstein guy. He's so weirdly calm and casual, even though he's physically violent.
Do you have any scary corsages? I'm taking my bride to a Halloween party.
That's a great Halloween costume.
I'm not wearing a costume.
Audrey wants to be a telephone operator. Audrey Jr. is terrified that people carve pumpkins for fun. The 3 of them go trick-or-treating. Nobody likes the tree costume.
Trick or treat!
Feed me.
Hey, cute costume. Except for the tree. Let's see what kind of goodies I got for you. Let's see. There's daffodils, and roses, and yummy chrysanthemums.
You're really sick. You know that? Come on.
The rest of the episode has living pumpkins. Seymour is afraid of a cemetery. You're not missing much. Episode 9 is called It's a Wonderful Leaf. I can only find it in German. I don't speak German, so I'm just guessing what it's about. Seymour gets assaulted by Jack Nicholson. Oh, God. Seymour gets assaulted by Jack Nicholson. Seymour has science class with Audrey and creates mustard gas. Oh, I'm losing it. Now it's really German. The flower-eating guy shows up again. Audrey hates him. Audrey pours water on him. Seymour gets blamed. Mushnick yells at him.
Sag's mir nicht. Das Dach ist schon wieder undicht.
Sie sind nicht der einzige Blumenland in dieser Gegend, wissen Sie?
Seymour sings, presumably, about being underappreciated.
Ich fühl mich ungeliebt und einsam. Fühl mich ausgesprochen unwillkommen.
He's visited by the Angel of Death. It's probably just Audrey. In a world without Seymour, Mr. Mushnick's shop gets shut down and he starts selling yogurt.
Why is yogurt night so difficult?
Payne Driller wins a Nobel Peace Prize. Death turns out to be an alternate version of Audrey Jr. We see an alternate world where people are plants. It was all a dream. So weirdly enough, the credits are in English.
Bill and Ted are flying their fantastic phone booth back to 1812.
My guess is that they released the episode dubbed in German to an English-speaking audience by mistake because nobody cared about this show. Episode 10 is called Tooth or Consequence. Audrey Jr. has a toothache. Seymour lies to his mother, making up a story about the Skid Row burglars.
Why don't you admit you ate the ice cream? You lied to me, Junior.
At least I didn't tell my mother that burglars broke into the refrigerator.
That wasn't a real lie. That was just a little white lie.
They sing a song about lying.
So don't take it for granted everything's true, because even I could be fading you. Lies! Big ones, tall ones, lies! Little bitty white ones, lies!
Audrey wants to become a lawyer.
I've decided to become a lawyer. Would you like to sue your tooth for pain and suffering?
Seymour is sent to the dentist. This woman looks like a pineapple. The dentist is Payne Driller's dad. The dentist design is just terrible.
Well, Seymour, open wide.
The dentist sings. It's nowhere near as good as Steve Martin.
Why does the dentist always get the grief? Everything he tells you meets with disbelief, and you all think he makes a killing.
The animation in these songs is always enough to give you a seizure, but this one is really bad. I like that the dentist has no glasses on. His eyes are just completely cataract. I love it, really. It's great.
That he's pulling and a drilling for the money.
Hold up, slow down. The dentist comes back with a fucking washing machine that he wants to shove in Seymour's mouth. It's established in this scene that Audrey Jr. breathes using lungs and his mouth, rather than a system of stomata. It turns out that the Skid Row burglars are real. Why do people keep trying to rob this flower shop? The robbers see that Audrey can talk.
You're not much to look at, are you?
Audrey sings about not believing everything you hear. They show Audrey Jr., the talking carnivorous plant, as the prophet Moses, at Mount Sinai, holding the tablets with the 10 Commandments. I don't think you should be showing that.
You gotta get real if you want to compete. So take it from me, the Vegazoid MC. Word. It doesn't just talk, it can rap too.
The burglars try to kidnap Audrey. I'm surprised this is the first time in any of these stories that someone else thought to kidnap the strange and interesting plant to sell. The real question is, why does Audrey not just eat them? The pot comes off Audrey and he grows legs and his aching tooth pops out. Payne Driller and his dog capture the burglars, and what the fuck? The burglars go on trial, and then... just watch it.
These men are obviously innocent.
They are?
Because they don't exist. That's why.
Yeah, we don't exist. Somebody made us up.
Yes, I did it. I made them up. That's the trouble when you start telling lies. Before you know it, you don't know what's true and what isn't. See what I mean?
I don't understand anything. Episode 11 is called Walk Like a Nerd.
A lot of interesting people ride the subway.
God, don't I know it. In this episode, Audrey wants to be a sports writer.
Isn't this a coincidence, Audrey? I mean, us meeting at the same station like this?
Well, we couldn't meet at different stations.
Every now and then there's a good joke. Audrey Jr. is jealous of everyone that has feet.
Why does a nerd like you get to walk around free as a bud when I have to drag a flower pot around everywhere I go? I gotta have feet. Give me some feet.
Not even gonna touch that one. Audrey takes over Seymour's body and uses him for his legs.
Gadzooks!
Yeah, buddy, that's right. Junior with the legs happening in the place to be.
Jesus Christ. Not much else to say in this one. Episode 12 is called Pulp Fiction. It starts off kind of beautifully.
We read a poem in school that said, I think that I shall never see a poem as lovely as a tree. And trees don't even rhyme. It takes years and years to grow one tree. But it only takes a few minutes to get to the Skid Row Natural Forest.
Audrey Jr. sings about deforestation.
Blue skies turn to gray and black. No boot of an owl, just the sound of a lumberjack. No peace in the valley, all I hear is cars. Lights through the cities, can't see the stars.
The song is mainly notable for these two dancing lumberjacks, but also for these beatboxing squirrels that sound like babies vomiting.
What's it all about? Yo, what's it all about?
So they go to the bullshit factory, where the trees are turned into paper. The Woody Sherman trees turned into pulp, and Seymour sings about justifying the destruction of the trees.
Let me tell you something about the process for the office. Cause you know they need paper, so they came up with this caper.
They try to find every newspaper in town to return them to the forest. The newspapers are brought to life by Audrey Jr., and they start invading Skid Row. People find new ways to recycle the disgusting garbage paper.
I tried using old newspapers as toothpicks.
Actually, it was my idea.
Now I don't have to read the back of the cereal box. I can read the cereal itself.
Episode 13, the final episode, is called Married to the Mush. Payne Driller's aunt, who I thought was his mom, wants to marry Mr. Mushnick because she thinks he's rich.
Why don't you and I have a romantic dinner for two?
Audrey doesn't like it because she hates that woman, and she looks like a pineapple. They talk about how she lost her mom in a mall.
How long has Mrs. Mushnick been, dead?
She's not dead. We just lost her. It was at the mall. We looked everywhere. We even checked the lost and found.
Mama left early, Daddy was poor.
This episode probably has the best writing out of all of them. Like, it sucks. Don't get me wrong, but the struggles that Audrey faces are written somewhat maturely. She gives up her dream of being a fireman to be a housewife, not because it's her passion, but because she's trying to make Mushnick realize he doesn't need to remarry, and that he has his daughter to love and take care of him. God, this priest looks disgusting. He's like the priest from The Corpse Bride. Audrey sings about how marriage is hell, and then influences the woman to walk out of the wedding.
Do you take this mush to be your lawfully wedded husband?
What are you, crazy? Why would anybody want to marry him? He doesn't have any money. He's probably just after my Brooklyn Bridge.
Are you through with that bouquet?
What do you mean I can't return it?
That line is just so funny to me. What do you mean I can't return it? This episode ends kind of bittersweet. I assumed they would end it where Mama Mushnick comes back, but they just kind of leave it where she's still missing somewhere.
It was a really nice wedding. I mean, considering nobody got married.
Just look at it this way, Daddy. We didn't really lose anything. We just didn't gain anything either. And we still have each other.
I was afraid somebody was going to say that.
I'm going home to fix your favorite dish, meatloaf a la Mushnick, just like Mom used to make.
Gee, that's nice.
What nice? Their mother was a terrible cook. I loved her, though, and I still miss her. Except when I'm eating. You're lucky you're not lonely, Seymour.
I guess this isn't a happy ending after all.
You want some of this food?
And that's all 13 episodes of the Little Shop cartoon. Like I said, it was a chore to watch. At no point was I looking forward to the next episode except to be done with it. There's some funny moments here and there, throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks and all that. That 90s in-your-face attitude is ridiculous. But I view it the same way I view Shark Tale. It's a product of its time and it has its own charm to it. And I don't hate all of the art style. The quick cutting animation in the music videos will give you a headache and some characters just look terrible. But details like the brick building backgrounds have that cool old New York feel and I can appreciate it for that. Someone must have cared a little bit while working on this. Although the jokes are dry, there is at least thought behind them. They're like dad jokes. The animation is insane specifically with the music videos, but at least they aren't bland with motionless characters. This series isn't like Johnny Test where it's lazy and cookie cutter. Someone put genuine energy into this. It just so happens that this energy was misguided and created a mostly mediocre product. I do have to commend the cartoon for its incorporation of musical numbers. This isn't Phineas and Ferb where every episode has one devoted banger. This cartoon has multiple songs per episode. They're definitely trying. And it's not like every song sucks, just most of them. But one thing that bothered me the most of all with this show is the dynamic between Audrey and Seymour. The main joke of the entire series is that nobody likes Seymour. He's a weenie and he has no friends. Every time Audrey interacts with him, she's just like fed up with his existence right off the bat. It's kind of jarring because they're supposed to be, you know, in love. Every episode shows Seymour getting physically and verbally abused, even by his supposed best friend Audrey Jr.
I wish Seymour was here. At least I'd have somebody to take my misery out on.
The point of Little Shop of Horrors is that Seymour's relationship to the plant is inherently toxic and you're supposed to not want them to be allied, except if they're plotting to kill a misogynistic dentist. Then that's fine. The plant is someone you're supposed to love to hate, and Seymour is the dorky underdog that you root for. But in this show, the plant has to be viewed as a good guy by the end, so you can reset the status quo in every episode and justify their friendship. But despite all of that, he's still a bad person to Seymour. Instead of Seymour viewing Audrey as the only person in his life that shows him genuine human compassion, she's now just as hateful as everyone else. And this is done so that the script can justify why Seymour is being pushed into a friendship with Audrey too. In this show's defense, there are some times where Seymour and Audrey are getting along, but it's very rare, and it feels ingenuine. Seymour isn't begrudgingly allied with Audrey too because he's getting rich and famous off of the murder. He's hanging out with Audrey too because he thinks they're actually friends. Now this could be a commentary about toxic relationships aimed at educating young and impressionable people. It makes sense that Seymour, being a child, wouldn't understand his relationship with Audrey too is toxic, especially if that's his only friend. You could have Audrey and Seymour become closer with each other in each episode. As their genuine friendship develops, Seymour could start to realize that his friendship with the plant isn't healthy and that he's being manipulated into feeding it. The show isn't clever enough to do this, but the show could be recreated and written better nowadays.
Word, Little Shop!
3 short stories, 2 movies, 1 stage play, 2 comic books, and 1 TV show later. That is the history of Little Shop of Horrors. The story that was created and recreated over the course of a century warns the audience not to fall victim to cheap fame and bloody money. You may be down on your luck, and you may come across something strange and interesting, but whether your intentions are genuine or as malicious as they can be, you will end up drained of life and energy, completely consumed in more ways than one. So remember, kids, don't feed the plant.
Do